Every chosen one has handlers. Everyone who's a satanically, ritually abused multiple, the kind of super soldiers that we've been telling you about, the ones that are going to be used. John Marks in his book called The Manchurian Candidates. Every one of them, they have handlers who seek to keep them controlled. That's the bottom line, that handle their life, that trigger them, call them in, adjust them like a robot. They adjust them in all the personalities. They get the information. They do numerous things to keep them. And here's the reason: they, and the handlers would be involved with this. They, the Luciferians, they have watchers and enforcers who are used to keep the cult multiple on track. That is the satanic agenda. So think about it, when you have hundreds of thousands and to the point of millions of cult multiples out there, many of them have broken down and have ended up in psych wards and counseling centers all across the United States, the UK, and in Canada. We have hundreds of thousands, and we have literally now millions of cases of DID, MPD, whatever you want to call it today. The bottom line is someone out there has created them. The issue of mind control and being amnesic and erasing things and burying things and putting things down. Listen, folks, why would anybody want to use that technology on a mind? You know why? To hide things. I mean, especially on the pervert side of all this, where they have sexually abused children. Listen, all the chosen ones have triggers, and I think we've talked a little bit about this already. The idea that a personality inside, say again, there's 35 personalities inside, they all have triggers or names and codes and so forth, and a handler knows this. They may have a little black book or on computer disk, whatever, probably encrypted or whatever, but they know they know who to, when they contact. Now, we've seen it where they've called and played dial tones over the phone, and that is triggered out, or a phrase, or even a card sent in the mail. Or timed triggers. When 11 o'clock hits, another personality would come up and take over the body and take the body out to a ritual site or to a handler. So inside personalities, runners and informers, and those who have been created to be bonded with handlers.
Hello. You're tall.
Do I have to be here for this?
Handler active imprint requires a direct line of sight, so she needs to be looking into those dreamy brown eyes when I wave my magic wand. This isn't about friendship, man. It's about trust. From this point on, Echo will always trust you without question or hesitation, no matter what the circumstance. You're about to become the most important person in her life. And take two.
Everything's going to be all right.
Now that you're here.
Do you trust me?
With my life. Do I know you?
Everything's gonna be all right.
Now that you're here.
And he would contact by tones over the phone and everything else, but he would contact the little personality inside and want her to come forward so that she could bring the entire physical body over to this local hospital where he could, get her there and do some work on her. We've noticed that some of the multiples are missing a day or two, or they're missing 4 hours. And when that happens, the difficulty is this, that they get reprogrammed and redemonized, and they have personalities in there that are going to be told and warned and punished not to be around you or not to come back. So handlers are constantly doing this, and they're triggering individuals out. Now, we've tracked handlers, to hotels, locations, military base, in a Hummer, in a black uniform. We've tracked handlers, to where doctors, and like I mentioned earlier, Timmy, this guy that was probably more of a watcher and enforcer than he was a handler, who literally would have hands-on, who would have knowledge of calling up personalities inside the multiple and dealing with them and getting the reconnaissance and talking and so forth, and reassigning the person and punishing the personalities that were trying to get away or talking to you and trying to get freedom. And so they go through, being shot with a stun gun and hurt in different ways, and whatever it takes, they want compliance. And so handlers have no trouble in that also. Who created them? Well, as we mentioned before, programmers. And programmers can also be handlers at times. Barring the handlers, which some of them we found to be doctors.
Last week that as with other material, this video was to remain private.
They're not supposed to be released to the media. We never would have. But somebody stole it, released it to the media in order to make her look bad.
But Stern's statements to King are belied by his own frequent off-camera instructions to Anna.
Say hi to your fans.
Hi to all my fans.
And so this whole, hair shaving thing with Brittany a couple years ago, when she shaved her head bald, I remember Cisco Wheeler, who is from an Illuminati family and broke out. But she had told me that that is the ultimate form of punishment, one of the very top forms of punishment for MK Ultra slaves, is that if they disobey their handlers, they are forced to shave their heads. And so that's why this whole thing starts to make sense now. Oh, Brittany was in the car, she was on the phone, she starts crying, and then she walks into a barber salon and shaves off her head. Yeah, that was her handler on the phone, most likely, and they were forcing her to shave off her head, and she did it.
Again, you track the CIA and the OSS and the Project Paperclip, and you're going to come up with all kinds of names of doctors who would have also been programmers, splitter programmers that would have learned the technology, but they would also be the ultimate handlers. Because if you have somebody that creates 30 personalities, name by name, person by person, giving them the programming, please understand the time investment they put into all this too. They know the people. They know the personalities. They know who they can call on. They know who's strong and loyal. They know who's caving in. They have informers that they've created on the inside of the multiple to inform to them who's caving in. And that's why the whole system is a thing of mind control, soul control, total human life control.
At target practice, his alter personalities take turns shooting. John's personalities have different styles of firing a gun. Scout shoots from one knee.
What is your function in the system?
My function?
Yeah.
I act as the observer, the scout.
How do you help John?
Excuse me?
John showed us his scrapbook of 13 years as a police officer. He's had many awards and commendations which began early in his career.
Hi.
While he was showing us the scrapbook, John switched to a 10-year-old personality named Johnny.
Hi.
John had trained his dog to stay out of the living room, but when he switched, the dog entered, sensing that his master was no longer present.
Okay, that's John.
Who's John?
He's an adult, and he's a policeman.
The child personality of Johnny recognizes John in the photograph and sees him as a separate person. When John switched back, the dog recognized him and left the room as he had been trained.
And by the way, many chosen ones who are older have become handlers of others. Just like many older chosen ones have personalities inside that know how to do rituals and everything else, they also have inside personalities that know how to split and program and bond and conjure demons and place them and then handle on a basic level other multiples. The other side of the story is watchers. Watchers are simply those who just come around and they're you know, and I've had so many stories across, you know, the board of people saying, well, you know what, we feel somebody's watching the house, somebody's watching the church, somebody's watching the counseling center. Listen, handlers will send in watchers to visit your church. People from covens who are going to come just to watch, and that's usually meaning reconnaissance, to observe. Everywhere we've dealt with multiples, that watchers show up and follow.
Bullying on steroids. We're talking about gang stalking.
Basically, the victims could be driving their car or talking on their phones or walking the streets when a group of people try to systematically terrorize them.
And that's what their job is all about. They're lesser people in the coven, and that's part of their job, to go out and watch, to go out and call the handler, to tell them. They're out there informing also. We have numerous engagements with watchers like this. And hear multiples that you're dealing with talk about enforcers, or simply ask them about enforcers. Enforcers are those who will, when a multiple has got, you know, retrieved back, they're going to do stuff. They're going to do stuff to enforce secrecy, silence. They're going to do stuff. They can be called a punisher. They're going to do harm. And again, sometimes this can be done by the handler. But enforcers within a coven to keep everybody in, and they're there kind of like the bouncer. But more than that, they're there. Their job is to make sure nobody gets out, that no information leaks, that nobody else gets in. They're there to do harm. And perimeter issues, for example, if they're doing a sacrifice out in the woods, they're not just going to be 13 people out there, you know, around some naked girl doing something without protection. They're gonna already have done ritual stuff for spiritual protection to keep everybody out. Then they're gonna have a perimeter around that ritual that guards. They're not involved in the ritual, but they guard anybody getting close to it. They may have a second, perimeter out there that also then guards, so that if you, as we have, come up on ritual sites, we have hit the first perimeter of protectors, enforcers, that have had weapons, that back in the woods and back in fields driven vehicles were all the lighting, brake lights and front lights and inside was all off. They're very secretive. Night vision and all kinds of things they may use to keep their ritual of sacrificing a human or doing whatever they're going to do very secretive. If they're doing it in a basement of some house, they're going to have outside, people keeping an eye on everything. Please understand, that's how it works in the drug world too. If you could understand how the drug world works with people who, watch out for the cops, and maybe enforcers that go after people, to break fingers and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like mafioso. Listen, they're out there in their rituals, thousands of places all over the land. In their rituals, they're out there like the Goliath, mocking God and getting ready to bring this assault, in the United States and other places, so that they can make room for the rise of the Antichrist and have the world, desperate for a savior like that. There will be those who will be used in the front line for the chaos, but please understand there are going to be millions of them used in Europe and the United States. Who do you think the soldiers of Antichrist are going to be? Who do you think is going to be compliant to him and listen to him like the SS troops of Hitler? This is about life, death, heaven, hell, the living God, and the reality of radical evil. This is about handlers who are being used by Satan. Again, we read in Timothy, they've been taken captive to do Satan's will, as have the chosen ones. So I am encouraging you to target them in prayer. Target them. Now, when I target them in prayer, I'm praying for this one factor: their salvation, their deliverance, God to come to them, visit them. Listen, in the Old Testament, God would even visit pagan nations with the terror of the Lord. The terror of the Lord to make them melt in fear. And I pray this way. I pray that God will engage them in such a way that they know the power of God, that God has come among them, and be warned. But ultimately, number one would be that they would be saved, that they would be radically encountered by the mercy and grace of Christ who died on the cross, not only for our sins, but for the sins of the whole world.